Screencasts for Sakai. My name's Kara, and I will be facilitating today's tutorial. And I can still see some folks are still trying to join the GoToWebinar session. So while we wait, I am just going to check in with everybody who is here to see if we can figure out how to raise our hands and also see if we can get you to answer some questions for me. So the first thing I'd like to check, if it's all right with you, is I'd like to see if anybody can hear me and see my computer screen. And the way that you can tell me that you're able to hear me is by raising your hand using the little hand icon in the GoToWebinar console. So I see a whole bunch of hands just came up, so it looks like the audio is working fine. That's great. Just so you know, everyone on the webinar except for me is muted, but if we have time at the end of the session today, if you'd like to ask a question out loud, I'd be more than happy to unmute you so you can ask your question. We've got about 13 folks on the webinar so far, and there were 32 registered, and we typically get about 50% attendance, and so it looks like nearly everyone's here. Here's somebody else coming in. So it looks like I'm going to give everyone just a couple of minutes to get themselves settled into the webinar. While we do that, I'm going to put everyone's hands down and ask a couple more questions. So this webinar is about creating screencasts, and so I guess what I would like to know is if there's anybody on this webinar who has ever created a screencast before. Raise your hand and let me know. Anyone has created a screencast before? I'm seeing 2 hands. Okay, so it looks like we have a couple of experienced screencast creators and some newbies as well. That's fantastic. All right, how about this question? How many of you have ever watched a screencast? Has anyone ever watched a screencast? Okay, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hands. Fantastic. So it looks like about just over half of us are familiar with watching screencasts, so that's great. All right, here's a question about Sakai. This is just a fun one that I'm excited about. Who here thinks that the Sakai Lesson Builder tool is awesome? Anybody? Raise your hand if you think Lesson Builder is awesome. Hey, some more hands. Lots of hands. Cool. Okay, so that tells me we are working with fairly experienced Sakai users. So that's great news. Okay, I'm going to put everyone's hands down. And the next thing I'm going to ask is if anybody knows somebody who is at the EDUCAUSE conference today. Do you know anyone who's at EDUCAUSE today? If you do, raise your hand. And it looks like we've got 5, 6, 7 hands. Okay, so a lot of us know somebody at EDUCAUSE today. I didn't actually realize when I booked this webinar that it was during EDUCAUSE. We typically get about 70 or 80 registrants for webinars like these, and I thought, why are only 32 people registered? And then I realized, oops, maybe they're all at EDUCAUSE. Well, how about this? Raise your hand if you're at EDUCAUSE today. If you're at EDUCAUSE and you're ditching a meeting, there is one person who is at EDUCAUSE that is ditching a meeting probably or ditching a presentation to come to this one. That you are awesome. So all right, thanks everybody for participating. And it doesn't look like anybody's coming in anymore. So I think everyone who was planning to attend today is actually here. So that's awesome. All right, so we're going to get started then. I wanted to let everyone know I am recording this session. So if you would like to watch it again, I'll be putting it up at brutuspartners.com. That's the website. And let's go ahead and get started. We'll start with the PowerPoint, and then I'm going to spend most of the time actually demonstrating how to create a screencast. But just so you know, this is kind of under today's topics here, what the agenda is. We're going to talk about what screencasts are, and I'm going to share some links with you. So if you would like to see a screencast, you can look at other screencasts. And then we'll discuss, you know, various things about why they're useful. But then, like I said, we're going to spend most of our time using the tools that you can use to create screencasts. And I'm going to do a demonstration of one combination of screencasting tools, and then I'll do another demonstration of a different combination of screencasting tools, so you can see just kind of how many options you have as regards creating screencasts. And then we'll have a discussion in QA. Now, if you do have questions throughout this session, please feel free to ask those questions using the questions box or the questions area in GoToWebinar. So you can just type your question in, and periodically I'll check the question queue to see if anyone has asked questions, and I'll answer them. Also, you should, I hope, be able to hear me. I think most folks raised their hands and let me know that they were able to hear me, and so that was great news. If you can't hear me, of course it doesn't make sense for me to say that if somebody can't hear, but hopefully if you can't hear, you're reading this, and if you're not able to hear, you should be able to call in using the telephone number as opposed to listening using your computer speakers, and you should be able to participate in the webinar that way. So let's move on to the next slide. This is going to be very brief. It's just a little section where I talk about Brutus Partners, which is a small company that I founded earlier this year, and we offer functional, technical, and implementation, also known as do-it-yourself Sakai implementation training, and we do this via the web. We can also offer these services on site, and as well, because we're kind of trying to keep up with the Sakai community and stay part of that, we're going to be doing approximately monthly webinars like these on basically how to do something, and that usually is going to be a webinar that somehow relates to Sakai. As in this case, we are talking about screencasting today. Now, screencasting doesn't necessarily have to have something to do with Sakai, but typically when instructors are looking to learn about screencasting and they're also using Sakai for teaching and learning, they might decide that screencasts should be available to students in a course in Sakai. So if you're not familiar with screencasts, I'm just going to talk a little bit about them. I'm sharing on the screen the definition from Wikipedia, which is a pretty basic definition, but essentially what a screencast is somebody is doing something on a computer and they are talking about what they're doing, and all of that is being recorded, both the screen events as well as the audio. And so it's basically just a video of somebody doing something on the computer. And in fact, because I am recording this webinar is in fact going to be a screencast. So if you come back to watch the webinar, you can watch a screencast about a screencast, and that is very meta. Okay, moving on to the next slide. This is just kind of a list of links that you can go to look at a screencast example if you want to see an example of screencasts. These aren't mine, but these are all publicly available screencasts. I've included a Khan Academy screencast as well because I think those are typically quite popular and they're very well done. And so if you're interested in Khan Academy, or if you've ever seen a Khan Academy video, then you yourself have actually seen a screencast. So moving on to why are screencasts useful, and why would you care to attend a webinar like this that talks about using screencasts and creating them and making them available in Sakai. I'm not going to read the items on this list because I know that everybody can see the items on this list, but I would encourage everybody, if you haven't been thinking about screencasting in Sakai, to first of all start, but also start thinking about why they might actually be useful for folks. So moving on, this is going pretty quickly, so this is great. So I'm going to talk next about the steps to creating a screencast. Now, like I said, a screencast is basically just a video of somebody doing something on the computer and talking about what they're doing. And so in order to create a screencast, you're going to have some type of content that you want to share with folks. Now, your content might be content that is, just something that exists in like some PowerPoint slides or some Keynote slides, and maybe you want to present some slides and talk through those slides. Maybe you would like to do a screencast that instructs users how to use the advanced features of Microsoft Excel, for an example. And so you might need to use Excel, and you might have to have some sample Excel spreadsheets to share on your computer screen. So that's kind of what I mean about gathering content. You want to think about what you're going to teach, what you want your learners to understand and learn, and how you're going to present your content. What are you going to use? And so in my example, in my meta example, where I'm doing a webinar on screencasting and I'm going to eventually turn the webinar into a screencast, what I'm going to use today is PowerPoint. I'm also going to use a tablet to kind of draw or write. And I'm also going to use a Sakai instance in a browser, so I'm going to use browser. So I'm going to use a lot of tools to kind of share my content. Something else you might want to do before you start creating a screencast is check to make sure that your microphone is working. And the easiest way to do that, and I can't tell you exactly how to do that because everybody has a different kind of computer and operating system and so forth. But the best way to do that is to first kind of decide what sort of screencasting tool you want to use and just try it. Play it back and make sure that you can hear yourself. And I'll actually go through that process in just a couple of minutes. So here's another set of steps, or another step in creating a screencast. You're going to want to use your computer programs and your voice to present the content on your computer screen, and you're going to use screen capturing software to capture the presentation of that content. And I'll share with you now that if you've never done a screencast before, you might end up doing the same thing like 5 or 6 times, because typically when you just get started you kind of mess up and stop and don't really say the things that you want to say. So repeating yourself is something that you might end up doing quite frequently. Editing your screencast. So, okay, let's say you've gotten through all of these steps. You've gathered your content, and you opened all the programs on your computer that you needed to open, and you used some screencasting software to capture yourself doing a presentation on the computer, and you have been able to successfully save that event as some type of video file. The next step is to edit your presentation. Now, I will share with you that editing a screencast is the biggest time suck you could ever imagine. I've been doing a pretty basic screencast, I would say, for the last 4 years. I'm not going to call myself a fancy screencaster. I'm not an expert in doing all of these cool and interesting bells and whistles and flips and turns and adding background music or anything like that. What I will say is that I like to say and I like to say an awful lot when I'm presenting, and if I am going to save those presentations, I prefer to take those and those out of the presentation. So just that alone, taking out things that you don't want in the presentation in order to edit it, can take upwards of 6 times the length of the actual presentation that you're trying to build. And so for like a 1-hour video like this, webinar that is going to result in a 1-hour video, I could spend greater than 6 hours perhaps just editing all of the errors out of it. So that's why I called step number 5 kind of optional, because it really takes a long time to do that. And depending on the type of presentation you want to create and how professional you feel it needs to look, you may just choose not to deal with editing the presentation. The rest of the stuff, fortunately, doesn't take that long, though. So once you have created a screencast and you've managed to successfully capture the screencast and you have a video file and you're ready to make it available to people, you have another decision to make, and that is, where are you going to put it? So you can't just keep it on your computer and email it out to everybody. That's not going to do, well, I guess you could do that, but that's not really going to do people much good. You're going to want to host it somewhere. So you've got some options regarding this step 6 as well. Depending on where you choose to host your video, you might have some access options to set as well. For example, if you choose to upload your screencast to YouTube, you can choose to make a screencast public, or you could choose to make the screencast private, which means only certain people would be allowed to view it and you'd have to specify who. Or you could choose to make that screencast unlisted. And so if you choose YouTube as your hosting option, then you can choose from those 3 access options. If you choose Sakai as your hosting option, you've got another set of access options and permissions and students and course information and all that kind of stuff that will help you determine who will have access to that screencast. And then your last step, of course, because this is a webinar about screencasting in Sakai, is to choose a tool or a set of tools in Sakai that you can use to give your students and your learners access to that presentation. So once you've created it, once you have a place to put it, now your last step is to figure out how people are actually going to see it. And so at this point, you might be wondering, well, what are my options regarding screen capture software and computer programs and hosting and where to put this stuff in Sakai and how do I choose? And unfortunately, I can't answer that completely for you, but I can share with you some of your options regarding presenting content, capturing your screen using screencasting capture tools, hosting, as well as how to embed your screencast in Sakai. And I'm actually going to make a selection from each of these quadrants on this screen and do a demonstration on how to actually produce a screencast. And we're going to do that sometime within the next hour or so. And then I'm also going to do it again with a different selection of content, screen capturing, and hosting tools. And so you can kind of see at least two examples, but really my point is, you know, you really want to select at least one of the available tools from each quadrant before you get started. So for example, in my first demonstration, which is going to be the cost-free recipe for screencasting success, which isn't entirely cost-free because, haha, I secretly already have PowerPoint, so there was some cost to that, but I'm not considering that a cost at this point because I think most folks have access to PowerPoint or the presentation tool that's available in OpenOffice. So for my next sort of demo, I'm going to use PowerPoint to present some stuff, and I'm also going to use my tablet to present some stuff, and I'm going to use Jing, which is a free tool that was created by TechSmith to capture the presentation of the stuff that I'm going to present. Once I'm done with that, I'm going to upload my screencast to the hosting service, which will be in this next example, screencast.com, and then I'm going to figure out how to embed that in Sakai, and I will probably end up using the syllabus tool or at least some place where I have access to the rich text editor. So I'm going to just check the question queue to see if there are any questions so far, and it looks like there are no questions so far, so that's great. Oh, by the way, I should share with you, I didn't create this slide to scare you. I just wanted to show you that you do have a lot of options, and you have to select some combination of options in order to build your screencast. So like I said, for this first demonstration, I am going to show you the cost-free recipe. This demo includes a cost-free recipe and a pain-free recipe, and so the cost-free recipe is first, and there is a little bit of pain in this recipe, and I'll talk you through that. So let's say that I am ready to do a presentation using PowerPoint and a writing tablet. So what I want to do is make sure I have, before I start my screencast, all the stuff that I want open on my computer screen. And so what I'm going to use is PowerPoint. So here is my PowerPoint, and I'm also going to use my writing tablet. So my writing tablet is plugged in, so now I'm ready. So my next step then is to, now that I have my content ready, is to start recording my screencast. So I'm using a tool called Jing, and I've got the tool called Jing open already on my computer, and you can kind of see it up in the top right corner of my computer screen. It looks like a little yellow sun. Jing is, like I said, free, and it actually works on both Mac and PC. It does have some limits, however. First, you can only record up to 5 minutes of content. So if your screencast is going to be longer than 5 minutes, Jing is not going to work for you unless, of course, you break it up into 2 different parts. And also, at the end of the screencast that you create using Jing, Jing puts its own logo at the end of your screencast to kind of advertise, you know, hey, go get Jing because it's cool or something. And so you will see a Jing logo, and your users and the people who view your screencast will also see a Jing logo when you use Jing at the end of the screencast. I think lastly, Jing doesn't really offer any editing tools, so if you intend to edit your screencast and take out all of your uhs and your ums and your coughs or your sneezes or whatever else you might have in your screencast, then Jing might not be the tool to use. But it is free, and so that is definitely a feature of Jing. And it is also easy to use, and I see that as a reasonable feature as well. So I'm going to click my capture button, and here's where I get to decide. You can kind of see my cursor moving around on the screen. I get to decide what section of my computer screen I'm going to capture. Now, when you use something like, well, actually not like Jing, when you use any sort of screen capturing software, the screen capturing software wants to know which part of your computer screen you want to record. So you can have stuff hiding on the sidelines not being shared with anybody, and you can just record certain parts of your screen. So in my example, I'm just going to record about this much. I think that looks pretty good. And you'll notice in the lower right-hand corner of where my screen is being measured, the number of pixels that I'm capturing are displayed. And so I'm capturing right now 828 by 543. Typically, you want to capture a smaller portion of your screen than the total screen, because if you're trying to do like a full screen screencast, it's going to be hard for people to see and watch, especially if it's a screencast that's embedded inside of other materials. So I know a guy who is actually really good at screencasting, and he says he always captures his screen at 800 by 600. So I'm going to stick with like 851 by 554. That looks good enough for me. And so now that I have decided what part of my screen I'm going to capture, my next step is to choose to capture a video. So I'm going to capture a video. This says I'm muted, so I'm going to unmute myself. And now here I am doing my screencast. And so let's say that I'm saying something very professional. Perhaps I should have caused the full screen to appear at the beginning. So at this point, I might, of course, stop the screencast and start over. But in the interest of time, I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to say that I'm talking about a tutorial, and we are going to discuss something called She Sells Seashells by the Seashore. We're doing a nursery rhyme tutorial, clearly, and so here I am doing my screencast. I'm capturing it using Jing, and I'm talking about some stuff. And now I need to finish this rhyme. So here I'm going to, so as you can see, I'm using PowerPoint. That's one of my tools for my screencast. So my next step is to use my Alt-Tab or my Control-Tab function on my keyboard to move to the next tool that I want to use. And so, again, I'm not trying to do anything super fancy here. I just kind of want to show you an example of some tools that you might choose to use for screencasting. So I think, what was my assignment? I was supposed to finish the rhyme. Old Mother Hubbard went to her cupboard. I hope this is right. It was her poor dog a bone, right? All right, so now I have used a fancy tool called PowerPoint, and I've used a fancy tool called my tablet to perform a screencast, and now I'm going to click this Finish button down at the bottom. So what just happened was basically this Jing tool captured everything that I was doing on my screen. So now I can play it, and I'll share with you that the first time you hear your own voice is going to be very painful. I've been hearing my own voice on screencasts for more than 7 years, and it is always really painful hearing your own voice. But just keep in mind you are your own worst critic, and it doesn't sound that bad to everybody else. So here I am playing my screencast. Let's pause it. Okay, so now I have a screencast, and I can see over here it is 1 minute 34 seconds. I can give it a name. So let's call this Nursery Rhyme Screencast. So I've used a lot of tools so far. I've used PowerPoint, I've used my tablet, I've used Jing to capture the screencast, and now I have to tell Jing what to do with my screencast. I have a couple of options here. I can choose to save this to my computer, and that'll save this as a Swift SWF Shockwave flash file, or I can choose to just click this little button that reads share via screencast.com, And if you have an account, and if you don't, you'll have to set one up. But if you have an account, or once you have an account at screencast.com, you can connect that to your Jing application, and it's just a click of a button. This screencast just uploads itself to this website and makes it available and gives me the link, and then I can go to the screencast on the website and I can embed the screencast in Sakai, which is actually my next step. If we go back to those steps in creating a screencast, I've actually already completed the first 5 steps. I have gotten to the point where I have uploaded the presentation to a place that can store or host my screencast. So now, optionally, depending on the hosting system that I chose, I might have to, at this point, select some access options. But with Screencast.com, everything that I have on my account is set up so that it's just mostly public, as long as I give people access to the link. And so what Jing did at this point was it basically copied the link, the direct link to my video, to the clipboard. So now I'm looking at the screencast that I just created, and this is online. I'm on the internet here. I just opened Chrome, and I am watching my screencast. So the next step, like I said, is to embed this screencast somewhere in Sakai. So here's where we start giving students access to it. Now, of course, I could just capture this link and copy it and paste it into an email and email all my students and say, hey, go look at my screencast. But it might make more sense to embed this as part of the content that I'm making available to students in my course. And so Jing actually very handily creates its own HTML embed code. And so I can copy, and I'm using my keyboard tools to just copy all of this HTML text, and I'm going to go into my Sakai course at this point. And let's say in this example, what I'm going to do is I'm going to embed this video in my syllabus tool. And you don't have to use the syllabus tool for your video. If you want to embed your screencast on a web page in resources, you can do that. You can basically embed your screencast in any place and on any page that uses Sakai's rich text editor. So as you probably know, when you go to create a syllabus and click the Create/Edit button, you have the option to use Sakai's rich text editor under the Add function to create some content. So we're going to call this syllabus video. I'm going to tell my students to I'm going to tell my students to watch the video, say hi, watch the video. And here is where we're going to use that ever so handy source button to basically paste all of that code from that Jing created into Sakai. And then it's pretty much just as simple as that. So once I click post, that video has now been embedded in my syllabus tool in Sakai. And just as well, like I said, you could put this video anywhere that you have access to the rich text editor. So it could go in lessons, it can go in announcements, you can put it in a calendar event or something like that. I mean, it really doesn't matter. If the system that you're using to host your screencast creates its own embed code, and most systems do, then you can just copy and paste that HTML directly into the source option on Sakai's rich text editor and embed it anywhere. So that's the totally free way to create a screencast, and by totally free, I am assuming that you already have something like PowerPoint on your computer, or you can get some sort of presentation software. So, so now we've got a screencast displaying in my syllabus. That's our first example. So now what I need to do is come back to our PowerPoint presentation that we were looking at just a second ago. And we're going to talk next about the pain-free recipe for success. And so the pain-free recipe involves using Camtasia. And Camtasia is a piece of software that is also designed by the same people who created Jing, the free software. The difference is that Camtasia comes with a whole suite of editing tools and embedding tools and production tools, and you can use the tools in Camtasia to make your video look awesome. It also has a really nice feature that allows you to upload your screencast directly to YouTube when you create it. And so I really like using YouTube because YouTube doesn't really care how I create my screencast or what dimensions I use. YouTube is just really nice about figuring that kind of stuff out. So there's less for me to do at the beginning, and YouTube just kind of takes care of it. And so this is why I would say the Camtasia YouTube combination is really pain-free, but Camtasia does come at a price. It's $100 for Mac users. Every once in a while, you'll find it on sale for half off, as long as you buy it from the website as opposed to the Mac App Store. And Camtasia is $299 for Windows users, and that's because the Windows version has different and more interesting features, but you can get an educator discount, and so you can actually purchase Camtasia for $179. So in this example, I'm going to use Camtasia to capture my my screencast. So I'm going to open Camtasia, and you'll notice that Camtasia has a lot more features than Jing does. So let me open my Camtasia tool. This is taking a while. Call this a new project. I'm going to do a new recording. And Camtasia allows me the option to select from some sort of preset region, or I could create my own custom region if I want to. I'm just going to select from this region right here, and now I'm going to start recording. So we get our little countdown using Camtasia to record, and oops, I was supposed to actually share that other PowerPoint that I had, so let's open that up again. Here we go. And so here I am doing a screencast, and we are talking about nursery rhymes again. And as part of the next sort of segment of the screencast, what I'm going to do is teach everybody how to go online to find cool pictures to add to their PowerPoint presentation. So I like to use Flickr because they have a pretty good collection of Creative Commons licensed content. So I can feel less scared about infringing on somebody else's copyright when I use some of their stuff. So we're going to teach everybody as part of the screencast how to search for seashells. So we're going to use Flickr to search for seashells. And next, I'm going to teach everybody how to find cool Creative Commons content. And so we should come up with some seashell pictures that are free to use. And we'll just call that the end of the screencast. So I'm going to stop recording this screencast. Camtasia opens, and as you can see here, I've got editing tools. So let's say I have played this screencast and I've discovered that, oops, there's an I know exactly what my ums look like. So I'm just going to grab that little and I'm going to take it out. So this is a nice tool that you can use to edit out all that kind of stuff. And so once you're done editing, if you choose to edit your screencast, you can use this share option to just push this directly to YouTube. And of course, you should connect your Camtasia software with your YouTube account before you're able to do this. But we're going to call this, oh, what should we call this? Seashell Demo. So I'm uploading this to YouTube, and this takes a little bit of time. So at this point, you might want to get up and go get yourself a cup of coffee and then come back. But really, once your file has been uploaded to YouTube, YouTube is going to generate a deep link to that item, which you can, of course, embed anywhere in Sakai. And YouTube also generates embed code, which you can use to embed the actual video inside of your Sakai course in any tool that uses the rich text editor. Or you could use Lesson Builder, add multimedia, which is an even faster way to embed your content, and it looks really cool. Now I know that at least half of you raised your hand when you said you thought that Lesson Builder was a cool tool, so I'm going to demonstrate that next, how you would go about embedding your awesome YouTube video in Lesson Builder. So I've actually created a top-level Lesson Builder page called Screencasts, and I'm going to add another page and call it Seashells Video. So here I am hanging out in Lesson Builder, and what I'm going to do next is use the Add Multimedia function to basically just paste the URL of the file that I just uploaded to YouTube. Now, of course, I am going through this a lot faster than my Camtasia upload is able to catch up with me. So unfortunately, I don't have that link just yet, but here we're just going to grab a random one from, I don't know if anybody follows these convos with my 2-year-old saying this is a super cute set of videos, but at any rate, you can just grab the link to your YouTube video and, whoops, why do I keep doing that? And you can paste it into Sakai. So we'll just pretend this is my screencast and that it uploaded, and click Save, and then Lesson Builder just kind of handles it and figures out, you know, how that's supposed to look and how big it should be, and it also gives your students the option to watch it on YouTube or watch it on full screen. And so basically we have just covered in I think just about 40 minutes or so, essentially 2 demonstrations on how you can quickly create screencasts for Sakai, and one of those demos was completely free, and one of those was supposed to be fairly pain-free, though I would say again that the length of time it takes to upload a video like this does take some patience, so maybe it's not completely pain-free, but at least we're close. So I am going to check for the question queue to see if there are any questions. Looks like somebody had a question. Oh, their sound cut out for a second. Where did I get that code from? That code that I was demonstrating earlier was it was generated by Jing, or excuse me, it was generated by Screencast.com, which was the system that I used for hosting. So in my, I'm just going to close this window for a second. In my when I went to see look at my video on Screencast.com, I selected the Show Details button. So there was a little button here. Here, I'll just hide the Hide Details button and show the Show Details button. So there was a Show Details button, and when I clicked on that, that displayed, well, of course, a bunch of details about the video, but also under this Share tab, there's all this code, and you don't even have to look at this code or care what it means. I certainly don't know how to write code like this, but essentially you just copy that code and you paste it into the source function of the Sakai Rich Text Editor. So I hope that helps clarify your question. Sorry the sound cut out. I hope everyone else is still able to hear. I'm not seeing any more complaints about the sound, so I'm thinking that it's probably true that you guys are still able to hear. So since there are no questions so far, finally, now I have some embed code from YouTube. Too late, Camtasia. I already used something else. So moving on to the next slide, we are just going to spend a little bit of time kind of talking about some of the best practices for creating screencasts. First of all, I know I'm using a lot of slides as part of this presentation, but I do prefer typically when I'm creating screencasts to spend more time showing. So I teach Sakai, that's my job, so I spend more time with my screencasts showing Sakai, going into an instance of Sakai and logging in and showing folks how to use it. So again, slides can be pretty boring, and you would be surprised how much better stupid little pictures make slides, right? So if I just had words on this slide, it would be incredibly boring, but because I have used a cute picture of a hippo yawning, indicating he's bored, that somehow makes a cute picture relevant to at least one of the bullets on the slide, and that somehow makes the slides a little bit more interesting. When you're dealing with screencasts, you also want to keep it very simple and short. So typically, folks have a very, very short attention span when they're dealing with watching things online. And so a video like this one I'm creating right now, which is a recording of this entire webinar, is probably not something a lot of people are going to end up sitting through, because folks can't pay attention for that long online, especially when it's recorded. So I recommend, I would say keep it to about 5 minutes. Anywhere from like 1 to 8 minutes is fine for a screencast, but you really don't want any more than that. When you are, depending on where you're hosting the screencast, you might have to consider choosing a more appropriate size for the video. So as I mentioned before, you don't necessarily want to capture your entire computer screen. Maybe there's only a certain section of the screen that you want to put content into, and that allows folks to see the video a little bit better. They don't have to scroll back and forth and up and down while they're watching it if it's a really big video, and so forth. I am really guilty of saying and all the time, and so I still do it, and nothing ever stops me completely from saying and all the time. But I actually wrote the word in big, huge letters on a piece of paper, and I, no joke, have it sitting above my computer right now, so that as I'm working on my computer and doing webinars, I can see the word and remember to try really hard not to say that. Like I said, it doesn't always work, but it helps. I know I mentioned this before, and I'll say it again. It takes a really long time to edit screencasts. So if you're interested in making them absolutely perfect, consider just doing it over again. If it's only 5 minutes, just do it over again if it didn't work out perfectly the first time, as opposed to making edit after edit after edit. Just do it over again. It's probably going to take a little bit less time, especially if you're doing little short screencasts. And I also would say, as a practice, try to be more interesting and more relevant than perfect and professional looking. I think, when folks are online looking for information and trying to learn, they are less interested in all the fancy bells and whistles and the background music and cool stuff like that, and more interested, if your content is actually relevant and interesting, they're more interested in what you have to share and what you have to say. And then also, I will share with you that the first time you create a screencast, you're probably going to watch it and be incredibly disappointed. First, the sound of your own voice having been recorded and played back to you is extremely painful, and also you are your own worst critic. So you're going to be listening for your uhs and your ums, and you're going to be listening for weird sounds that you make when you breathe, and it is just so painful. So just remember that, and even if you don't think it's perfect, if you can think that at least it is good enough, it's probably a pretty good screencast if you would ask anybody else. So last couple of things you might want to consider. I have shown you 2 hosting tools that you can use to upload your screencast content to. You can also upload your screencasts directly to Sakai resources. And so typically Camtasia creates an MP4 video and Jing creates an SWF video, and you can put both of those types of videos in Sakai and use the functions of the rich text editor to embed those videos anywhere you use the rich text editor. The problem with that is that sometimes the Sakai tool, the rich text editor tool, doesn't always behave in terms of figuring out how to display the video properly. So I've spent a lot of time just being really frustrated and changing the dimensions of the frame of the flash embedding on Sakai, and it's just been so frustrated. I finally said, you know what, I'm just going to give up and not host my videos in Sakai, and instead I'm going to host them somewhere else and just embed them in Sakai. That also saves a lot of space. So if you do intend to reuse your videos from course to course, you might consider hosting them somewhere outside of Sakai and just embedding them in the course, and that way, in your course you just have links and embedded videos as opposed to copying an entire video from course to course over and over again. So the last thing to consider are, of course, what are your actual goals with screencasts? What are you hoping to accomplish? Are you looking to teach somebody something? Are you looking to entertain? Are you trying to do both? If you can do both at the same time, you should give yourself a big pat on the back because it's awesome. So just kind of think about your goals, and that should help at least drive some of your decisions as regards which tools you want to use to present your content, which tools you want to use to capture the screen, and which tools you want to use to host your content, and which tools you want to use to present your content in Sakai. So I'm going to stop now because I think we're at the end of the presentation, and I am going to check to see if there are any additional questions. And it looks like there's just a couple of people saying hello. Hello to everybody else. Hi. And okay, here's one. If you upload a screencast into resources in one course, can you play that from another course? So, we were talking about Sakai content hosting and stuff getting broken, I bet. That's probably happened to you, and that happens to me too. So the question is really about, what happens if you upload something into your course in Sakai, and then you give your students access to that video. What happens when you duplicate your course? Typically that type of link could break. So you've got a couple of options if you're having a problem with your links to your content breaking. You could choose to basically host your content outside of Sakai using some of the methods that I've shared with you today, like maybe using screencast.com or using YouTube. Or you could create, this is kind of like an admin-y sort of thing, but you can create a project site in Sakai, and you could call it just like a content project site or something. And there is a way to set special permissions on that project site so that only users who have a login to Sakai are able to see the video. Now, typically, that's the case if instructors are really interested in hosting their video inside of Sakai, is that, they don't want it public. They don't want other people to see it. And, of course, in Sakai, in order to see something, you have to be a member of the course in which the content exists in order to see the thing. And so that creates a problem when you duplicate your course, right? So, so you can create what's called like I said, a special project site that has some special permissions within it that would allow you to basically direct any user who actually has a login to Sakai to your video, and they would be allowed to see it, but nobody who sits outside of Sakai who doesn't have a login to Sakai would be able to see that video. Or you could consider just making your video public inside of Sakai. Now that does mean that your video, if it's hosted in Sakai and marked public in resources, is going to be public. So that link that you give users to access your video is a public link, and anyone who doesn't, if somebody doesn't have a login to Sakai, they will still be able to see that video. But that's just another option you have regarding, kind of setting permissions and setting access on your content. Okay, I'm going to see if there are any other questions. It looks like there are no other questions, so I think we are just about done here. So I think that was my last slide was the questions and answers. So I'm going to direct everybody back to, of course, the About Brutus Partners slide and share with you, of course, if you have any additional questions, please feel free to email me, or you can visit the brutuspartners.com website for more information, or of course if you'd like to book a training event either online or on site, I'm more than happy to talk with you about that. And as well, I think I mentioned this before, this event is being recorded, so I will be posting the recording for this tutorial on the brutuspartners.com site, and I'll probably do that sometime early next week. And when I do that, I typically send out a message to the Sakai announcement list letting everybody know that the recording is available. So again, I just want to thank everybody for coming, and I hope you have a great rest of the afternoon. And if you're at EDUCAUSE, have fun at EDUCAUSE. Take care, everyone. Goodbye.